Okay, let's unpack this. When you think of World War II, most people, they focus on the maps. Who took what hill when?
Right. The military strategy.
But looking at our source stack today, the real story isn't just the borders. It's how the war completely dismantled the global psyche.
It really is the pivot point of the 20th century. You just can't understand the modern world without seeing that chain reaction. From the trenches of WWI all the way to the V-2 rocket.
And that's exactly the mission for this deep dive. We're going to connect the dots from the lingering resentments of Versailles
Through the sheer brutality of the Eastern Front.
to the shifting gender roles on the home front, and then finally how the world pivoted almost instantly into the Cold War.
The connections are what matter here.
So let's start with that hangover from World War I. We all know the Treaty of Versailles imposed this crippling debt on Germany, but the money wasn't the real smoking gun, was it?
No. The psychological blow was so much deadlier. It created, this perfect breeding ground for the stab-in-the-back myth.
This lie that the German army didn't actually lose on the battlefield, but was betrayed at home.
And that lie radicalized an entire population. That anger just morphed into this aggressive expansionism. You see these ideologies popping up. For Germany, it was Lebensraum.
Living space.
Italy had Spazio Vitale, and Japan was pushing Asia for the Asians.
Which is really just a cover for replacing Western colonial rule with their own.
Exactly. And all the while, the League of Nations is just paralyzed. It failed to stop Italy in Ethiopia, Japan in Manchuria, and then came appeasement,
The Munich Agreement, basically giving Hitler what he wanted.
which just emboldened him. And that failure of diplomacy leads directly to June 2010, 1941, Operation Barbarossa,
The invasion of the Soviet Union.
the largest military operation in history. And this is where the conflict's character completely changes. It stops being a war for territory and becomes a war of annihilation.
That's a heavy term. And we're talking about things like the Einsatzgruppe.
Mobile killing units, deployed specifically to murder civilians. It wasn't just a battlefield anymore. It was a continent-sized crime scene.
And the German leadership explicitly planned for mass starvation.
Yes. But then came Stalingrad, the encirclement of the Germans' Sixth Army. That wasn't just a strategic loss. It proved the German war machine wasn't invincible.
It's just so hard to switch gears from that level of atrocity to, say, the American home front, but they're deeply connected. That war of annihilation required so much manpower.
It did. It's the whole concept of total war. You can't mobilize that many men without fundamentally changing the role of women.
Right. Enter Rosie the Riveter. Or at least the myth of Rosie.
Yeah.
19 million women surged into the workforce.
But the sources we have from the National WWII Museum, they paint a very different picture than the poster. It wasn't glamorous.
No, there was real hostility from male coworkers. And then, the second the war ended.
There was this massive push to force women back into lower-paying so-called pink-collar jobs.
And the gender dynamics were messy for men, too. I was reading about the 50,000 conscientious objectors. I mean, the irony is just incredible.
Labeled cowards for refusing to kill.
Right. And yet many of them volunteered for these incredibly dangerous tasks, like being human guinea pigs in medical experiments, just to prove their bravery without combat.
The social pressure was just so intense. But as the fighting stops in 1945, the global tension, it doesn't. We go from a hot war against fascism straight into a Cold War.
Between the U.S. and the USSR, the Iron Curtain descends. And that curtain wasn't just physical, it was an intellectual race.
A race for technology. And this desperation led the U.S. to, well, Operation Paperclip,
It's such a surprising fact. The U.S. recruits 1,600 German scientists.
including V-2 rocket engineers. It was a pragmatic, if, let's say, unsettling move.
It was a cold calculation.
Yeah.
Winning the space race against the Soviets was deemed more important than prosecuting their wartime pasts.
And the rebuilding effort reflected that new divide. You had the U.S. Marshall Plan pumping $13 billion into Western Europe.
While the Soviets were essentially plundering Eastern Europe for resources to rebuild their own country.
So in the end, the war destroys the old empires. It gives birth to the United Nations.
And immediately sets the stage for the
Yeah.
nuclear arms race. It completely reshaped the human landscape.
Completely.
Which leaves us with a final provocative thought for you. If the end of World War II immediately launched the Cold War and proxy conflicts in places like Korea and Indochina, did the global conflict actually end in 1945? Or did it just change its methods?
It really is the question.
Thanks for listening to this deep dive. Stay curious.